If you haven't heard of Elon Musk, you've clearly been living under a rock. In fact, he's pretty controversial, to say the least. While anyone who keeps up with the latest news and trends on design and innovation usually loves the guy for his brains and ambition, many simply call him a or even worse. So let's dive into the evolution of Elon Musk. The good, the bad, and definitely the ugly. First off, Musk's Twitter feuds might be getting out of hand. Now, to catch you up, Walker is basically a public transit policy consultant with a PhD in humanities. And the Tesla CEO definitely made a few comments at an AI conference. In fact, he had called out public transportation for quite simply being a pain in the and that anyone could wind up sharing a ride with a random stranger who might even be a serial killer. And this was just the start of what would be a series of tweets by Walker aimed at Musk. In fact, he even went so far as to say that the Tesla CEO just wanted to create a public transportation system designed for the protection of the elite. In response, Musk didn't hesitate to call him an and his directness and unprofessional tweets really put his reputation in question, because up until the controversial Twitter feuds, many believed that he's a pretty great leader, or an innovation guru, if you will. But comments like this tend to change the perception of quite a lot of his fans out there. And do a quick Google search and you'll see a bunch of articles that cast him in a negative light. So despite his accomplishments and drive for innovation, many of his fans are left wondering if they're idiots for thinking he was a great guy all along. And how much do we really know about him? Coming up, let's take a look at his life along the way. In short, we're left with a burning question. Is he a or an innovative leader? And should we really look up to him? Well, let's just say that we've got quite a lot of books about him out there, and some might be able to sort out this internal debate with some pretty detailed research. Honestly, for a majority of people, their thoughts on Musk sort of swing back and forth, seeing the good, the bad, and even the ugly sides of him. Let's start with the little kid Musk. Alright, so having a kid with an insatiable appetite for learning is definitely something to be proud of. Now, when Elon Musk was a kid, he'd often read at least one book a day, and his most remarkable achievement came right after he convinced his dad to buy him a Commodore VIC-20, which right now is a pretty old and basic computer. In fact, most kids today don't even know it exists. Anyway, according to the manual, it was supposed to take at least 6 months to get through every single basic lesson. But one thing we want to emphasize throughout this video is that Elon shouldn't be underestimated. As a kid, he literally stayed up and finished the whole thing in 3 days, and even went on to design an entire video game on it. In fact, its source code was also published in a magazine, netting him $500. Moving on to the bad and ugly. As a kid, he was teased and bullied a lot. Honestly, sometimes it even went as far as physical violence. One time, he was beaten up so badly that he blacked out and was hospitalized for an entire week. And we don't need to tell you that physical scars aren't the only kind that bullying like that leaves. Adding to that, his dad seems to be the darkest part of his life, one he tries to hide. Many believe that he might have been abusive. In fact, Elon refused to talk about his father, and even said he's good at making life miserable. I don't know how someone becomes like him. Following up, first business. Musk was probably the most inspiring. If a kid gets bullied by his classmates and peers so much that he ends up in the hospital only to come back home to a potentially abusive father, it can definitely scar them for life. And soon enough, Elon left South Africa on his own, without a word to anyone, and stayed in Canada for a while, but he didn't really have a permanent home until his brother met up with him. From here, they made their way to Palo Alto, and that was where he started his very first business with his brother. Zip2 was basically MapQuest before MapQuest, which was just Google Maps before Google Maps, and it would end up selling for $307 million. Cha-ching! Anyway, let's move on to the ugly stuff. Now, while Elon and his brother pretty much set up a successful company, things weren't so smooth with their investors' powers. In fact, the investors forced the product towards media companies as more of a business directory instead of the B2C direction that Musk was looking for. And to make matters worse, he even experienced his very first canceled merger catastrophe. And in less than a decade, after pretty much being homeless in Canada, Elon was now Silicon Valley's rich guy. And that's where we see money and power taking over him as he turned into the jerk people talk about. It's when he purchased one of the only 62 McLarens in the world, which was a huge deal. Coming up, the young and rich Musk, who won hearts. Let's ditch his McLaren purchase for a minute and talk about how he literally poured all of his money into his next venture, which was supposed to change the banking industry. At the time, people said he was absolutely crazy and that consumers were never gonna trust the security of the internet for online banking. But it shouldn't come off as a surprise that his company, X.com, was way more successful than anyone had ever thought. In fact, he even beat out his biggest competitor, PayPal. And we know what you're thinking. Wasn't Elon the one who founded PayPal? Not exactly. Instead, it was Peter Thiel who started it and later merged it with Elon, making him the largest shareholder. Now, here's the crazy bit. While Elon was on a plane for his honeymoon, one of the nastiest Silicon Valley coups of all time occurred. In fact, right after the plane landed, he went straight back to try and save it, only to be forced out as CEO. And then they later rebranded as PayPal. Moving on, after another horrible merger process, Elon finally had some time to step back and resume his honeymoon. But he almost died of malaria in South Africa and survived, only for eBay to purchase PayPal for $1.5 billion, netting him $250 million. Cha-ching yet again. And while that sounds great and all, a book called The PayPal Wars, published right after the deal, pretty much painted him as the villain of the entire company. Up next, the beginning of SpaceX and Tesla. Revisiting his childhood dreams of going to Mars, he visited NASA's website one day and found that they didn't even plan or mention going to Mars. So what did he do? He went straight to Russia to see if he could buy a rocket himself, but the prices were ridiculous. He just jumped into a pile of books and studied how rockets are built. With that said, on his plane ride back home, he declared that he's gonna build a rocket himself, and that's how SpaceX was born. Other than his fascination with outer space, he always saw a future of all-electric cars. So when Martin Eberhard and Mark Tarpenning approached him to become the first investors in Tesla, Elon was all in. In fact, he wanted it to be a sort of luxury brand with the image of a sustainable future. And that's all great and all, but SpaceX also earned him his reputation as a staunch leader. Many employees talked about his lack of care with sometimes impossible assignments that received no appreciation from the SpaceX CEO other than a word. Okay, really? That's it? Moving on with Tesla, things weren't smooth either. In fact, when they decided to have a huge press event after creating the first workable concept car, Elon found out he wasn't even listed as a founder in the press release. And to make matters worse, a New York Times article also left him out. Finally, there were a lot of challenges that didn't seem to end. With the first round of pre-ordered cars, nothing was going right. The parts of the car were way too expensive, and everything was behind schedule. So Elon called a board meeting to replace Martin Eberhard as CEO. They agreed, and after an interim CEO, Musk took over in 2008. Now, he's been leading SpaceX, Tesla, Hyperloop, Solar City, and Boring Company. So clearly, he's become an expert in leading multiple companies and dealing with extreme pressures all at once. His leadership style is pretty fierce, to say the least. But it seems like nothing's ever enough for him. The only thing he cares about is saving our species. So whether he's a or not, the greater good is more important to him than anyone's feelings. That's a wrap for this video. What's your take on Elon Musk? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.